At my best friend's engagement party, his fiance's sister grabbed me and said, "Stop the wedding, I'm begging you." Outside the restaurant, she broke down completely, showing me her phone. "My sister isn't who she says she is. Look at these records." I called the police. What they revealed about her identity destroyed 3 families. The champagne flute shattered when it hit the floor, spraying glass across my shoes. I dropped it the second Claire's fingernails dug into my forearm, her grip so tight I could feel my pulse hammering against her palm. Her eyes were wild, mascara already smudged like she'd been crying before she found me. The engagement party was in full swing behind us. 80 people packed into Marcello's, the upscale Italian place downtown, celebrating my best friend Kevin's upcoming marriage to the woman of his dreams. Except Claire, the bride's younger sister, was dragging me toward the exit like the building was on fire, whispering urgently that everything we knew was a lie. Outside, under the amber glow of the streetlights on a cold Friday night in October, she pulled out her phone with shaking hands and showed me documents that made my vision blur. Birth certificates that didn't match, social security records with different names, newspaper clippings about a missing person, and photographs of a woman who looked exactly like Victoria, Kevin's fiancée, but with a different name, a different life, a different family. A family that had been searching for her for 6 years. I'd known Kevin since we were 14 years old, met in 9th grade geometry class, bonded over our shared hatred of proofs and our love of terrible action movies. We'd been inseparable ever since, roommates in college, groomsmen at each other's parents' anniversary parties, the kind of friendship where you didn't need to talk every day, but knew the other person would answer at 3 a.m. if you called. Kevin was a good guy, genuinely good, worked as a middle school history teacher, coached the debate team, volunteered at a youth center on weekends. He'd dated casually over the years, but never seriously, until he met Victoria Hayes 10 months ago at a teacher development conference in Seattle. She was a reading specialist, or so she said, working with struggling students at an elementary school in Tacoma. Beautiful, warm, articulate, with a laugh that made everyone around her smile. Kevin had been smitten immediately, and honestly, I couldn't blame him. Victoria seemed perfect, patient with his terrible cooking, interested in his stories about his students, supportive of his dreams to maybe write a history textbook someday. She'd integrated seamlessly into his life, our friend group, his family. His parents loved her. His sister loved her. I loved her. In that platonic way you love your best friend's partner when they make your friend genuinely happy. The engagement had happened 6 weeks ago, a surprise proposal at the waterfront park where they'd had their first date. Kevin had been planning it for months, saving up for the ring, a modest but beautiful diamond that represented 3 months of his teacher's salary. Victoria had cried, said yes, and immediately started planning a small winter wedding for December, just 8 weeks away. Nothing extravagant, maybe 50 people, a simple ceremony at a historic mansion that doubled as an event venue, a reception with dinner and dancing. Her only family, she'd said, was her younger sister Claire, 26 years old, lived in Portland, worked in graphic design. Their parents had died in a car accident 5 years ago, she'd explained, and it was just the 2 of them now. Claire had seemed normal when I met her, quiet but friendly, clearly protective of her older sister, helping with wedding planning and offering to design the invitations. There'd been nothing to suggest she was about to blow up 3 families' lives in a restaurant parking lot on a Friday night. Claire's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone steady. I had to take it from her, zoom in on the documents she'd pulled up. The first was a birth certificate for someone named Natasha Volkov, born in Spokane, Washington, 31 years ago. The photograph next to it showed a young woman who could have been Victoria's twin. Same dark hair, same green eyes, same small scar above her left eyebrow that Victoria had explained came from a childhood bike accident. But the name was wrong. The parents' names were wrong. Vladimir and Svetlana Volkov, not the Hayes family Victoria had described. I scrolled to the next document, a missing persons report filed in Spokane 6 years ago for Natasha Volkov, age 25, disappeared without a trace on March 3rd. No history of mental illness or drug use, no indication she was planning to leave, just gone. The family had searched for years, hired private investigators, done media appeals, offered rewards. Nothing. And then Claire showed me the photographs she'd found, images from a Facebook memorial page maintained by the Volkov family, dozens of pictures of Natasha at various ages, and every single one could have been a photograph of Victoria. "This is insane," I said, my voice barely working. "Claire, this has to be a mistake. People have doppelgangers. Maybe Victoria just looks like this woman." "Look at the scar," Claire said, pulling up another photo and zooming in. "Same scar, exact same location. Look at the birthmark on her neck, same birthmark. Look at the dental records I found." She showed me more files, documents she must have obtained through means I didn't want to think about. The dental x-rays matched. The medical history matched. Everything matched except the name and the story. "My sister isn't Victoria Hayes," Claire said, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know who she is, but she's not the person she's been pretending to be. And I can't let Kevin marry someone who's been living a lie." "How did you find this?" I asked. "How long have you known?" "I started noticing inconsistencies 3 months ago. Little things. She'd mention memories that didn't match stories she'd told before. She'd forget details about our supposed childhood together. She'd get nervous when I asked specific questions about our parents or our hometown. I thought maybe I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. So I started digging, Claire continued, wiping her face with the back of her hand. I hired a private investigator, gave him what information I had. He found this, all of this, in 2 weeks. Victoria Hayes, or whoever she is, has been using fake documents for years. The social security number is stolen from someone who died in infancy. The birth certificate is forged. Even I'm not real, not the way she's described me. We're not sisters. I don't know what we are to each other, but we're not biological family. My stomach felt like it was falling through the pavement. What do you mean you're not sisters? I met your parents. I saw photographs at Victoria's apartment. Claire shook her head. Those photographs are fake or stolen. I've never met those people. Victoria hired me 6 months ago to play the role of her sister. She paid me $5,000 up front and promised another $10,000 when the wedding was over. I'm an actress, struggling to make rent, and she offered me what seemed like an easy gig. Pretend to be her sister, help with wedding planning, attend events, be supportive. I thought it was weird but harmless. Maybe she just wanted family support and didn't have any real relatives. I didn't realize I was participating in fraud. I didn't know she was deceiving Kevin this completely. The world tilted sideways. I grabbed the wall of the restaurant to steady myself. You've been lying to Kevin this whole time. Why are you telling me now? Because I can't do this anymore, Claire said, her voice breaking. Because I met him, really talked to him, and he's a genuinely good person who doesn't deserve this. Because I looked into the Volkov family, saw their grief, their desperate search for their daughter, and realized I'm helping someone who might have committed a crime, might have abandoned a family who loves her, might be running from something terrible. And because the wedding is in 6 weeks, and once they're married, the legal complications multiply. I need to stop this now, but I can't do it alone. Kevin won't believe me. He's too in love. But he might believe you. I felt like I was going to vomit. We need to call the police. We need to show them this evidence. I tried that, Claire said quietly. 3 days ago, I went to the Portland Police Bureau, showed them everything I'd found. They took a report, but said identity fraud cases are complicated, that people change their names legally all the time, that without proof of criminal activity or harm to specific victims, there wasn't much they could do. They said if Kevin wanted to file a report after the wedding about being defrauded, they'd investigate, but they couldn't stop a wedding based on speculation from someone who admitted to being paid to lie. Did you tell them you were hired to pose as her sister? Yes, and that's when they got skeptical about my credibility. They said I was an unreliable witness who'd participated in deception and might have ulterior motives. They basically told me to talk to Kevin directly and let him make his own choices. But if I tell Kevin, he'll think I'm trying to sabotage the wedding. He'll think I'm jealous or crazy. Victoria has been so kind to me in public, so grateful to have me as her sister that Kevin won't believe she's been manipulating everyone. You need to help me convince him. I need to see him first, I said, my mind racing. I need to talk to Kevin alone before we bring this to him. And we need more evidence, something undeniable. Claire, do you have contact information for the Volkov family? She nodded. I have the mother's phone number. Svetlana Volkov. She still lives in Spokane, still maintains the missing person page, still hopes her daughter will come home. Should we call her? Not yet. First, we verify everything you've found. Then we talk to Kevin. Then we decide next steps. But Claire, if this is real, if Victoria really is this missing woman living under a false identity, we're not just stopping a wedding. We're potentially solving a 6-year-old disappearance and exposing whatever she's been running from. I walked back into the engagement party feeling like I was moving through water. Everything looked different now, surreal and staged. Victoria stood near the bar, stunning in a navy blue dress, laughing at something Kevin's mom was saying, her hand resting on Kevin's arm with casual intimacy. Kevin looked happier than I'd ever seen him, his face glowing with the kind of contentment that comes from finding your person, from believing you've won the lottery of love. I watched Victoria smile, watched her tilt her head in that charming way she had, watched her navigate the room with practiced ease, and wondered who she really was. Was she Natasha Volkov, a missing woman who'd abandoned her family for reasons unknown? Was she someone else entirely, a professional con artist who'd done this before? Or was there a legitimate explanation, a witness protection situation, or a trauma escape that would make sense of everything? I pulled out my phone and texted Kevin. Need to talk. Important. Can you step outside for a minute? He glanced at his phone, looked at me across the room with a questioning expression, then excused himself from his conversation and headed toward the exit. I met him in the same parking lot where Claire had ambushed me 20 minutes earlier. What's going on, man? Kevin asked, concerned. You look like you've seen a ghost. I need you to listen to me very carefully, and I need you to stay calm. Kevin's smile faded. You're scaring me. What happened? It's about Victoria. His expression hardened immediately. If this is some kind of cold feet intervention where you tell me I'm moving too fast, I don't want to hear it. You know I love her. You know this is real. I know you think it's real. But Kevin, there are things about Victoria that don't add up. Things that Claire found. Things you need to see before the wedding. Kevin crossed his arms. Claire? Victoria's sister? What did she say? She showed me documents, birth certificates, missing person reports, evidence that Victoria might not be who she says she is. Kevin laughed, but it was a harsh, disbelieving sound. Are you serious right now? You're telling me my fiancée is lying about her identity because her sister, who I've known for 6 months, showed you some papers? This is ridiculous. I pulled out my phone, opened the photographs Claire had sent me. Look at these. Just look. Kevin snatched the phone, scrolled through the images, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and then something that looked like fear. This is photoshopped. These are fake documents someone created to mess with her. People do this. Identity theft. Scams. Claire's probably being blackmailed or scammed herself. I thought the same thing, I said carefully. But Kevin, the dental records match. The medical history matches. The photograph of this missing woman, Natasha Volkov, has the same scar above the eyebrow that Victoria has. The same birthmark. The same everything. Kevin's hands were trembling now. There's an explanation. There has to be. Maybe Victoria knew this woman. Maybe they were friends, and Victoria took her identity after she died. Or maybe Victoria is in witness protection and had to change her name. There are innocent explanations. Then ask her. Ask her directly. Show her these documents and let her explain. Kevin looked back toward the restaurant, toward the warm lights and celebration, and the woman he was planning to marry in 6 weeks. I can't do this tonight. Not at our engagement party. Not in front of everyone. Then do it tomorrow. But Kevin, you need to do it soon. Because if Victoria is hiding something this big, you need to know before you legally bind yourself to her. And the Volkov family deserves to know if their missing daughter is alive. He handed my phone back, his face pale. I'll talk to her tomorrow. But if this turns out to be nothing, if there's a reasonable explanation, you and Claire owe her a massive apology. Agreed. But if there isn't, if she can't explain this, you need to be prepared to call off the wedding. I didn't sleep that night. Lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios, trying to make sense of what Claire had found. By 6 a.m., I gave up and started researching. Pulled up everything I could find on Natasha Volkov, the missing person case, the family's search efforts. The details were heartbreaking. Natasha had been a graduate student studying environmental science at Washington State University, described by friends and family as brilliant, ambitious, caring, with no history of depression or indication she wanted to disappear. She'd been planning a trip home for her mother's birthday when she vanished, left her apartment with her purse and phone, never returned. Her car was found abandoned at a mall parking lot 3 days later. No signs of struggle, no forensic evidence, just gone. The police had investigated thoroughly, looked into relationships, finances, possible reasons to run. Nothing. The case had gone cold after 18 months, but the family never stopped searching, never stopped hoping she'd come home, or that they'd at least get answers about what happened. If Victoria was Natasha, she'd let her family suffer for 6 years. That wasn't witness protection or trauma escape. That was something darker. Kevin called me at 9:23 a.m., his voice tight with controlled panic. I talked to her. And? She denied everything. Said she's never heard of the Volkov family, that the photographs are just someone who looks like her, that Claire must be trying to sabotage the wedding for some reason. She said Claire's been acting strange lately, asking invasive questions, making her uncomfortable. Kevin paused. But here's the thing. When I showed her the dental records, the medical history, the specific details that matched, she got defensive. Really defensive. Started crying, said I didn't trust her, accused me of choosing you over her, threatened to call off the wedding if I kept investigating. That doesn't sound like someone with nothing to hide. No, it doesn't. What are you going to do? I need proof. Real, undeniable proof. Can you help me get it? What kind of proof? I need a DNA test. If we can get Victoria's DNA and compare it to the Volkov family's DNA, we'll know for certain whether she's Natasha. But she's not going to voluntarily give a sample, so we need to get it without her knowing. That's when I called Claire and explained Kevin's request. She didn't hesitate. I can get it. Victoria drinks coffee from the same mug every morning at the apartment we're sharing for wedding planning. I can bag it before she washes it, preserve whatever saliva is on the rim. And I already have contact with Svetlana Volkov. She said if we could provide a sample to compare against, she'd submit her own DNA immediately. We just need a lab that can process it quickly and discreetly. I know someone, I said, thinking of my cousin who worked as a lab technician at a private genetics testing facility. Give me 2 days. Claire got the sample that afternoon, a coffee mug carefully bagged and labeled, chain of custody documented with photographs and timestamps. I met her at a coffee shop far from Kevin's neighborhood, took the evidence like we were conducting a drug deal, felt the weight of what we were doing settle over me. If we were wrong, if Victoria really was who she said she was, we were violating her privacy and trust in a profound way. But if we were right, we were potentially reuniting a family and exposing someone who'd built a life on deception. My cousin Diana, who worked at Pacific Genetics Lab, agreed to run the test off the books as a favor. She didn't ask questions when I explained it was for a potential missing person case, just took the samples and promised results in 48 hours. Those 48 hours were torture. Kevin avoided Victoria, claimed he had a work emergency and needed space to prepare for parent-teacher conferences, which was partially true, but mostly an excuse to put distance between them while we waited for results. Claire stayed at a hotel instead of the apartment she'd been sharing with Victoria, sent polite texts about needing alone time, deflecting questions. And I went through the motions of my job as an IT consultant, sitting through meetings and writing code while my brain spiraled through the implications of what we might discover. On Wednesday afternoon, Diana called. "You need to come to the lab. Now." The tone of her voice made my stomach drop. I drove across town, found her waiting in a small conference room with printouts spread across the table. Her expression was grim. It's a match. The DNA from the coffee mug matches the maternal DNA sample from Svetlana Volkov with a 99.97% probability. Whoever Victoria Hayes is, she's Svetlana's biological daughter. She's Natasha Volkov. I sat down hard, the room spinning slightly. So she's been lying this entire time. About everything. Diana nodded. There's more. I ran the sample through a few databases we have access to, and Natasha Volkov's DNA was already in the system from the missing person case. But here's what's interesting. There's a flag on her file from the FBI. She's not just a missing person. She's wanted for questioning in connection with financial crimes. What kind of financial crimes? Diana pulled up another document. According to the notes, Natasha disappeared right around the time a major embezzlement investigation was closing in on the environmental nonprofit where she worked. About $340,000 went missing from grant funding, routed through shell accounts, withdrawn over 6 months. Natasha was the grant coordinator, had access to all the accounts, and disappeared 3 days before the FBI planned to interview her. The case file suggests she was either a primary suspect or had information about who was responsible. Either way, she vanished before they could question her, and the investigation stalled. My hands felt numb. So she's not just living under a false identity. She's potentially a fugitive. Diana's expression was sympathetic. I'm legally obligated to report this. The FBI has an open case, and I just confirmed the identity of someone they've been looking for. I need to make a call. She made the call while I sat there processing everything. Within an hour, I was giving a statement to Special Agent Robert Kavanaugh, FBI White-Collar Crime Division, 15 years investigating financial fraud, based out of the Seattle field office. He'd driven down to Portland the moment Diana notified the bureau that she'd identified Natasha Volkov. Agent Kavanaugh was in his mid-40s, sharp-eyed, methodical in his questioning, and very interested in how we'd obtained the DNA sample. I explained everything, the engagement party, Claire's suspicions, the documents we'd found, Kevin's confrontation with Victoria, our decision to run a DNA test. Agent Kavanaugh listened without interrupting, took notes, asked clarifying questions. When I finished, he sat back and considered me carefully. You understand you've just handed me evidence in a 6-year-old fugitive case. Natasha Volkov has been on our wanted list since 2018. We've had periodic sightings, rumors, possible identities, but nothing concrete until now. The DNA confirmation is significant. It means we can move forward with an arrest warrant. What happens to Kevin? I asked. My best friend is planning to marry this woman in 5 weeks. Agent Kavanaugh's expression softened slightly. Your friend is a victim here. Natasha has been defrauding him, potentially using him as cover to establish a new stable identity. Once people are married, it's easier to justify name changes, shared assets, integration into a community. She was probably planning to use the marriage to cement her new identity permanently. Will you arrest her before the wedding? That depends on a few factors. We need to coordinate with local police, verify the evidence chain, prepare the case, but yes, ideally we'll take her into custody within the next 72 hours. I need you to not tell anyone about this, especially not Natasha or Victoria or whatever she's calling herself now. If she suspects we're closing in, she'll run again. She's done it before. What about Kevin? Can I tell him? Agent Kavanaugh considered this. You can tell him the truth, that we've confirmed Victoria's real identity and there's an active FBI investigation. But stress that he cannot confront her, cannot let on that anything has changed. He needs to act completely normal until we execute the arrest warrant. Can you do that? I'll make sure he understands. I called Kevin from the parking lot, told him to meet me at my apartment immediately, that I had the DNA results. He arrived 20 minutes later, face drawn, clearly bracing for bad news. I showed him everything, the DNA confirmation, the FBI case file that Agent Kavanaugh had shared, the evidence that Victoria was actually Natasha Volkov, wanted for questioning in a major embezzlement case. Kevin sat on my couch and stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. She's a criminal. She's been lying to me for 10 months. About everything. About everything, I confirmed gently. Her name, her family, her past, possibly her entire personality. I don't know who you fell in love with, Kevin, but it wasn't a real person. It was a character she created. Kevin's eyes were wet, but he wasn't crying yet, still in shock. Why me? Why did she choose me? Agent Kavanaugh thinks you were the perfect cover. Stable job, good reputation, no criminal history, deeply integrated in a community. Marrying you would have given her permanent legitimacy, a reason to have changed her name, legal documentation that wouldn't raise flags. She probably targeted you specifically, researched you, engineered the meeting at that conference. Kevin laughed bitterly. The conference. She told me she'd been assigned to attend at the last minute, that her colleague got sick and she filled in. It seemed like fate. It was calculated. I'm sorry, man. I reached over and gripped his shoulder. I'm so sorry. What do I do now? Act normal. The FBI is planning to arrest her within 72 hours, but if she suspects anything, she'll disappear again. You need to pretend everything is fine. Continue with wedding planning. Don't give her any reason to run. Can you do that? I don't know. How do I look at her knowing what I know? How do I pretend to love someone who's been using me? You think about the Volkov family. You think about the fact that they've been searching for their daughter for 6 years, that her mother still maintains a memorial page hoping for answers. You help bring Natasha home, even if it's not the reunion anyone wanted. Kevin spent the next 3 days in what I can only describe as controlled agony. He texted Victoria normally, met her for dinner Wednesday night, discussed wedding details Thursday evening, smiled and kissed her, and played the role of excited fiancé, while knowing every word out of her mouth was part of an elaborate lie. He called me after each interaction, voice shaking, describing how surreal it felt to watch her perform the character of Victoria Hayes, how he kept looking for cracks in the mask, moments where the real Natasha showed through. Did you see anything? I asked after the Thursday dinner. Any sign she knows something's wrong? Kevin was quiet for a long moment. She asked me if I'd talked to Claire lately. Said Claire had been distant, not responding to texts about bridesmaid dress fittings. She seemed worried, almost paranoid. I told her Claire mentioned being busy with a work project and would catch up soon. But the way Victoria looked at me when she asked, there was something sharp there, something calculating. I think she's suspicious. That's not good. The FBI is executing the arrest warrant tomorrow morning. Agent Kavanaugh called me this afternoon with the final timeline. They're planning to take her into custody at 7 a.m. at her apartment. They want you there as a witness, and they want me there to support you. After tomorrow, this is over. Friday morning arrived cold and gray, rain spattering against my windshield as I drove to meet Agent Kavanaugh and his team 6 blocks from Victoria's apartment building. Kevin sat in the passenger seat, silent, staring out at the wet streets. We'd barely slept, had spent most of the night talking through what would happen, how the arrest would unfold, what came next. Agent Kavanaugh had briefed us thoroughly. They'd approach quietly, no sirens, knock on the door with a warrant, take Natasha into custody with minimal drama. She'd be transported to federal holding, processed, arraigned, and then the legal system would handle the rest. The embezzlement charges, the identity fraud, the years of deception would all be laid out in court. Kevin would be called as a witness, probably would have to testify about their relationship, the wedding planning, the lies she'd told. It would be humiliating and painful and necessary. At 6:52 a.m., we pulled up behind the FBI vehicles, 3 unmarked sedans parked in a staging area. Agent Kavanaugh met us, handed us visitor badges, explained that we'd wait in the lobby while they executed the warrant upstairs. If Natasha tried to run, if there were complications, we'd be kept clear of the situation. But assuming everything went smoothly, we'd be brought up afterward to provide formal identification confirmation. We waited in the lobby for 18 minutes that felt like 18 hours. I watched Kevin's hands shake, watched him check his phone compulsively, watched him flinch every time the elevator dinged. Then Agent Kavanaugh's voice came through a radio one of the junior agents was monitoring. Subject in custody. No incidents. Bring up the witnesses for identification. We rode the elevator to the 8th floor in silence. The hallway was full of FBI agents, evidence collection teams photographing the apartment, bagging items, documenting everything. And in the middle of it all, sitting on a chair in the hallway with her hands cuffed behind her back, was Victoria. Except she didn't look like Victoria anymore. Her face was blank, emotionless, the warm charm completely gone, replaced by something cold and distant. She looked up as we approached, made eye contact with Kevin, and for a moment, something flickered in her expression. Not remorse, not apology, calculation. She was already planning her next move, her defense, her survival strategy. Agent Kavanaugh approached us with a formal tone. Mr. Kevin Hollister, can you confirm the identity of this individual? Kevin's voice was steady, despite the tears on his face. Her name is Victoria Hayes. That's the name I know. But I understand her real name is Natasha Volkov. The woman in handcuffs smiled slightly, a sharp, knowing expression. You have no idea who I really am. None of you do. Agent Kavanaugh ignored her. Miss Volkov, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. You'll be transported to federal holding for arraignment. Do you understand these charges? I want a lawyer. Of course. You'll have access to legal counsel during processing. He gestured to 2 agents who helped her stand and guided her toward the elevator. Kevin watched her go, his whole body tense, and I saw the moment something broke in him. The realization that the person he'd planned to spend his life with had never actually existed, that he'd been in love with a ghost, a performance, a carefully constructed lie. After she disappeared into the elevator, Kevin turned to Agent Kavanaugh. What happens now? Now we build the case. We'll need your testimony about the relationship, the engagement, what she told you about her identity. We'll work with the Spokane Police Department to notify the Volkov family that we've located their daughter, and we'll investigate whether there were other victims, other identities, other crimes. This is likely not the first time she's done this. She's too practiced, too good at creating a false persona. We think there might be a pattern going back years. The next week was a blur of statements, interviews, and media coverage. The story broke nationally. Missing environmental activist found living under false identity, engaged to teacher in elaborate fraud. Reporters camped outside Kevin's school, his apartment, tried to get comments from his family. The Volkov family issued a statement through their lawyer expressing relief that Natasha was alive and hoped that she'd finally face accountability for her choices. The embezzlement investigation was reopened with new urgency, forensic accountants tracing the missing $340,000 through shell accounts and cryptocurrency transactions that led to properties in Nevada and offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. It became clear that Natasha hadn't just stolen from the nonprofit. She'd been running a sophisticated financial scheme that involved multiple fake identities, fraudulent grant applications, and money laundering across state lines. The charges multiplied: wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, unlawful flight. By the time the indictment was finalized, she was facing up to 40 years in federal prison. Kevin canceled the wedding, obviously, sent messages to all the guests explaining there'd been a family emergency, and the wedding was postponed indefinitely, which was technically true, even if it massively understated the situation. He returned the venue deposit, canceled the caterer, boxed up the invitations Claire had designed, and spent a weekend going through his apartment removing every trace of Victoria. Photographs, clothing she'd left, the toiletries in his bathroom, the books on his shelf she'd recommended, everything went into boxes that he asked me to donate or dispose of. He couldn't look at any of it without feeling sick. The therapist he started seeing, Dr. Laura Simmons, licensed clinical psychologist with 18 years specializing in trauma and betrayal, told him this was a normal grief response, that he was mourning not just the relationship, but his ability to trust his own judgment. How did I not see it? Kevin asked during one of our long conversations at his apartment 3 weeks after the arrest. How did I spend 10 months with her and never once suspect she wasn't who she said she was? Because she was a professional, I said gently. This wasn't her first time creating a false identity. She'd practiced, refined her technique, learned how to be whoever she needed to be. You're not stupid for believing her. You're human. You wanted to believe in love and happiness and a future together. She exploited that. Claire reached out a month after the arrest, asked if we could meet. She'd been cooperating fully with the FBI, providing testimony about how Victoria had recruited her to play the sister role, what instructions she'd been given, how the deception had been maintained. She was facing potential charges herself for fraud and conspiracy, though her lawyer was negotiating a deal based on her cooperation and the fact that she'd ultimately blown the whistle. We met at the same coffee shop where she'd handed me the DNA sample, and she looked exhausted, guilt etched into every line of her face. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I'm sorry I participated in this for as long as I did. I should have questioned it from the beginning, should have refused when she first approached me with the offer. I needed the money, but that's not an excuse. I helped her hurt Kevin. You also stopped her," I pointed out. "You're the reason we caught her. If you hadn't come forward at the engagement party, she would have married Kevin, and the deception would have continued for years. Maybe. Or maybe I just delayed the inevitable. She would have slipped up eventually, or run again, or done something that exposed her. I just wish I'd acted sooner. What's going to happen to you legally? My lawyer thinks we can get a plea deal. Probation, restitution, community service, but no prison time since I cooperated and have no prior record. I'll have a criminal record, though. That'll affect my career, my housing, everything. That's the consequence of my choices." The trial was scheduled for the following spring, but Natasha's lawyers negotiated a plea deal in February to avoid the publicity and expense of a lengthy trial. She pleaded guilty to 15 federal charges in exchange for a recommended sentence of 25 years with possibility of parole after 15. The sentencing hearing was held on a cold Monday morning in March, the federal courthouse packed with journalists, FBI agents, representatives from the nonprofit she'd stolen from, and the Volkov family. Svetlana Volkov gave a victim impact statement that left half the courtroom in tears, describing the agony of 6 years not knowing if her daughter was alive, the guilt of wondering what she'd done wrong to make Natasha run, the desperate hope that someday she'd get answers. "I thought she was dead," Svetlana said, her voice breaking. "For 6 years, I mourned my daughter. I visited her empty grave, celebrated her birthday alone, kept her room exactly as she left it hoping she'd come home. And now I learned she was alive the entire time, living a completely different life, becoming engaged to a kind man she was deceiving, building a future on lies and stolen money. I don't know this person. My daughter, the girl I raised, would never do these things. So I'm mourning twice now, once for the daughter I thought I lost to tragedy, and again for the daughter I lost to choices I can't comprehend." Natasha was given the opportunity to address the court. She stood in her orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, face impassive, and delivered a statement that felt rehearsed and hollow. "I made terrible choices driven by fear and desperation. I'm sorry for the pain I've caused the Volkov family, Kevin Hollister, and everyone else affected by my actions. I hope someday they can forgive me." The judge, Honorable Patricia Sullivan, 32 years on the federal bench, former prosecutor known for tough sentencing in fraud cases, was unimpressed. Miss Volkov, you didn't just make terrible choices. You orchestrated a complex, multi-year fraud that destroyed lives and families. You showed no remorse until you were caught, and even now, your apology rings hollow. The evidence shows a pattern of manipulation and deceit that suggests a fundamental lack of empathy for your victims. I'm sentencing you to 25 years in federal prison. You'll serve a minimum of 15 years before parole eligibility. Additionally, you'll pay full restitution to all victims, estimated at $340,000 to the nonprofit, $35,000 in wedding-related expenses to Mr. Hollister, and damages to be determined in civil proceedings. The gavel fell. Natasha showed no reaction, just turned and let the marshals lead her away. Kevin, sitting next to me in the gallery, exhaled slowly. It's over. Kevin took a leave of absence from teaching for the rest of the school year. His principal understood, arranged for a long-term substitute, and told him his job would be waiting when he was ready to return. He spent the spring traveling, visiting friends in other cities, hiking national parks, doing anything to put distance between himself and the life he'd been building with someone who didn't exist. We talked regularly, long phone calls where he processed the betrayal, the shame, the anger, the grief. Dr. Simmons helped him understand that he wasn't a fool for falling in love, that Natasha's ability to deceive people was a skill she'd honed over years, that any normal person would have believed her. The FBI's investigation uncovered 2 other identities Natasha had used over the previous 8 years, 2 other men she'd become engaged to before disappearing when relationships got too serious or when she sensed suspicion. Kevin was just the latest victim in a long pattern of exploitation. Knowing that didn't make it hurt less, but it helped him understand it wasn't personal. He'd been a mark, a target, selected for qualities that made him useful to her goals. She'd never actually known him, never actually cared about him, and the person he'd loved had never existed at all. I visited the Volkov family in Spokane 6 months after the sentencing. Svetlana had invited me, wanted to thank me personally for helping find Natasha, even though the reunion wasn't what anyone had hoped for. We sat in her living room, surrounded by photographs of a young Natasha before she became a fugitive, and Svetlana told me stories about the daughter she'd lost. Bright, passionate about environmental issues, close with her family, engaged to a childhood sweetheart who'd proposed right before she disappeared. That engagement had ended when she vanished, the young man eventually moving on and marrying someone else, but the family still wondered if that was part of what triggered her flight. Had she panicked about commitment, felt trapped, made impulsive choices that snowballed into crimes she couldn't walk back from? We'll never know, Svetlana said sadly. She won't talk to us, won't take our calls, won't respond to letters. It's like she's already dead, just in a different way. I'm sorry. I wish I could have brought you better news. You brought us answers. That's something. We spent 6 years in limbo, not knowing, and that's a special kind of torture. At least now we know she's alive, even if we can't reach her. At least we know we didn't fail her somehow. She made her choices. Those weren't your fault. Kevin eventually returned to teaching in the fall, threw himself into his work with the kind of dedication that comes from needing purpose and routine to survive grief. He coached the debate team to a state championship, started a podcast about history education, volunteered more hours at the youth center, filled his life with meaningful work that reminded him why he'd chosen teaching in the first place. He dated cautiously, slowly, with the wariness of someone who'd been burned badly and knew how careful he needed to be with trust. I watched him rebuild, bit by bit, becoming a different version of himself. Still good, but more guarded. Still optimistic, but more realistic. The experience had changed him fundamentally, the way trauma does, but he was adapting, healing, finding his way forward. Claire stayed in Portland, completed her probation, and used her experience to become an advocate for fraud awareness, speaking at colleges and community centers about how easy it is to get drawn into deceptive schemes, how anyone can be manipulated by someone skilled enough. Her story resonated with audiences, the honest admission of her mistakes, combined with the courage to expose the truth eventually. I think about that engagement party sometimes, about Claire grabbing my arm in the middle of celebration and whispering that everything was wrong. I think about how close we came to not investigating, to dismissing her concerns as wedding stress or sisterly jealousy. If I'd brushed her off, if Kevin had married Natasha, if we'd waited even another week to run the DNA test, she would have disappeared again. The FBI confirmed she had an exit strategy ready, a new identity being created, accounts being slowly drained, plans to vanish right after the honeymoon. Kevin would have woken up one morning to find his wife gone and his bank accounts empty, another victim in Natasha's long trail of destruction. Instead, we caught her, stopped her, gave the Volkov family answers and prevented future victims. It wasn't the happy ending anyone wanted, but it was justice. Kevin's healing now, slower than he'd like, but steadily. The Volkovs have closure, painful, but real. And Natasha's in prison where she can't hurt anyone else. Sometimes that's the best outcome you can hope for. Not perfection, but accountability. Not happiness, but truth. The wedding that never happened saved Kevin from years of deception, and I'm grateful we listened when Claire said something was wrong. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.